The time was around 10:30 at night, and I was at the gym getting ready to go home after a workout. I stepped out of the gym after saying goodbye to Mandy, a nice lady who works there. As soon as I stepped out, something about the streets just didn't feel right. I stood in front of the gym, surveying the area. The sidewalk was way too clean, the streetlights had different designs from the ones I'm familiar with, and the buildings and cars looked futuristic. I turned around to go back inside the gym, but it was gone. Some kind of building was still there, but it wasn't the gym. You know how in the films when characters see something strange or incredible, they often close their eyes, then open, or they would rub their eyes as if they would clear their visions? Well, I did exactly that. I wasn't even thinking when I did that. I just reacted to the situation because I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. Moments like that, you truly begin to question your sanity. Think about it. You have the proof of a different world right in front of your eyes. And yet, the memories in your brain tells you that this shouldn't be, that you are in fact in a place where you don't belong. I had no choice but to walk toward my apartment. The layout of the streets looked to be the same, even though everything on it looked unfamiliar. On the way home, I saw a few people on the streets and noticed they looked different. I don't mean that they had 6 arms and 4 legs. No, nothing that drastic. But it was mainly the fashion and hairstyle that stood out. It's hard to explain, but they looked very much like the people that you would see in Hollywood films of the 40s perhaps. I say it's hard to explain because they also looked very modern. It was akin to seeing a fusion of the retro and futuristic style. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the best I can do. The women who passed by me looked at me strangely. I thought perhaps they found my fashion to be odd, and so I inspected my clothes. I should have been wearing a hoodies and a pair of sweatpants, but to my dismay, I was in the same style of wardrobe the ladies were wearing. I was in such a shock that I didn't even know that even my clothes had been changed somehow. As I was getting closer to home, I reached into my pocket to find the keys to my apartment. I grabbed something, but it wasn't the keys. I took it out of my pocket and saw a thin plastic strip that looked like a miniature credit card. It was connected to a small metallic bar that had some heft to it. I looked at it and wondered which one of the 2 strange items could be the key and which one was the keychain. Is it the plastic or the metal? When I arrived at my apartment, or at least where my apartment is supposed to be, there was a building and an entrance to the building, not much different from what we know. I inspected the door and the area right next to the entrance, but I couldn't find any hole where I could insert a key. I had nowhere else to go, and by the way, my cell phone had disappeared. I had it in my pocket when I got out of the gym, but it was gone when I was checking my pockets for the keys. Hence, I could call no one for help, not that I think the cell phone would work anyway, but regardless, I reached for the doorknob and twisted it. To my surprise, it opened. I figured either the plastic strip or the metal bar was working like a keyless entry system would in a car. I entered the lobby and headed toward the elevator. Then, without me pressing on any button, the elevator called for the carriage on its own. It arrived shortly thereafter, and soon I was standing in front of my unit. I stood there for a while imagining all kinds of different scenarios. What if the door doesn't open? Could someone be inside? What do I do next if the door does open? How in the world am I gonna continue living in this world? I was scared, I was panicking, and I couldn't believe I was actually stuck in this ludicrous situation. I think I could have been standing there for hours had it not been for the sound of the elevator door opening from the far end of the hallway. I didn't want to bump into anyone else, so I just opened the door then entered. As I walked through the doorway, I could see the changes happening all around me. It was akin to seeing my own reality being painted over the alternate reality I was stuck in. I actually saw the changes. It was fast, but not fast enough that the naked eye would miss it. If I had to time the whole event, I would say that the changes took place inside 5 seconds of time. I was now back in my own reality. I felt relieved, so much so that my legs were shaking and I was almost crying. After regaining my composure, I checked all around the apartment to make sure that I was truly back to where I belong. Nothing seemed out of place, and I was 99% certain I was in the correct reality. I've been doing lots of reading regarding this subject, and as it turns out, people can imagine all sorts of things inside their head and make those imaginations come true in their own world. I don't mean that you can create a whole world with your mind, but rather your mind could trick you into visualizing things differently. Could my case be one of those? I think it could. I don't think any reasonable person would dismiss such plausibility without concrete proof against it. For now, that's the best explanation I've got for what happened to me. But that doesn't make me feel any better than before, because if it were true, then it means it can happen all over again, and I don't want to experience the same thing again. After an ugly breakup with my ex-boyfriend and then getting kicked out of his house, I had packed up all of my stuff at midnight and was headed to my brother's in Idaho. I couldn't stop crying, and it wasn't because of the breakup. I was crying because I looked so pathetic. My brother warned me of my ex. He told me he knew the type and implored me to not move in with him. Well, he was right. My ex and we started out with a long-distance relationship. He would come see me once every month. We would spend 2 to 3 days together, then say goodbye on Sunday nights. Those brief encounters felt so special, and I genuinely thought that I was in love. Once again, my brother warned me that the feelings I felt were more due to the longing, the feeling that you get when you first experience a long-distance relationship, and that it wasn't love. After all, how much love can you feel for someone that you get to see 2 days out of the month? But yeah, I moved in with my ex, and it was really nice during the first month when the business in the bedroom was still fresh and exciting. Predictably, he changed with time. Long story short, he started coming home late, got ticked off at everything, I caught him texting other girls, we had a fight, and then he kicked me out. That's the reason why I was in my crappy 2002 Toyota Camry, jam-packed with all of my stuff, and me driving as I'm crying like the complete idiot that I am. Up to that point, I had driven about 100 miles and had another 200 miles to go. Initially, I didn't notice anything odd because I was so distraught. But as I continued to rack up the miles, I began to realize that I hadn't seen an exit, towns, or even a car for at least the last 20 miles. I'm not familiar with this stretch of the road. The only time that I drove here was when I was going to my ex for the first time. Even so, isn't there a law that every stretch of the freeway is supposed to have an exit every so and so miles? I think I heard that from someone. So naturally, I was concerned. It was another I told you so moment. My brother told me to get a GPS unit if I didn't want to use up the data for my phone. I should have listened. I drove for another 2 miles or so when I finally saw a sign for an exit. A smile of relief washed over my face, but not for long. It was an empty sign. There was nothing written on it. I continued driving, but no exit came about. I wondered if this was perhaps a new road that was being built. But then if that were the case, then how could have I gotten on it? That didn't make any sense. I pulled the car over by the side of the road, then opened the Google Maps app on my cell phone. The signal was strong and the phone was functioning just fine, but it couldn't get my location down. I cleared the cache, rebooted the phone, but still nothing. That's when I saw a faint light coming from afar. It looked to be a vehicle that was coming closer, but the headlights were way too dim. As it got closer, I could tell it was a car, but not exactly the way it's supposed to look. How do I explain this? It looked semi-transparent. In fact, when it passed me by, I could see the trees across the road through the car. I even saw the rear passenger in the car looking at me. The dome light in the rear seemed to have been turned on because the person who was looking at me sort of had a luminance about him. I was freaking out because I thought I had just seen a ghost. I stepped on the gas, and after about 2 minutes, I found myself doing 90 miles an hour. I took deep breaths and slowly depressed the gas pedal. Once I settled at 60 miles an hour, I began to wonder just what in the hell was happening to me. I checked Google Maps again, but still nothing. I know you're not supposed to use your cell phone while driving, but trust me, this situation should be the exception. I saw more cars along the way, and they all had that strange transparency and luminosity about them. The spookiest part of the whole thing was being able to see the passengers inside. And again, they too had the transparent and luminous quality about them. I continued driving for another 2 hours. I wasn't sure at first, but after a while, it was clear the cars were getting less and less transparent and luminous. Eventually, all cars on the road looked normal, and I began to see the signs for local exits. I took one of the exits and found myself in a town that I couldn't recognize. I opened Google Maps and saw that I was 90 miles off from where I should have been. The road had gone back to being normal, and Google Maps was working again. I arrived at my brother's some 2 hours later, and that was the end of the scariest drive I've ever had. I don't know if I had been possessed by something, or if I was stuck in a glitch in the Matrix type of a situation. I'm not gonna say that I know what I got myself into, because I honestly have no clue. But this I can tell you for sure. The transparent and luminous cars and people that I saw, those weren't the product of my imagination. I saw them and they were real.